people with complex trauma can tend to vacillate between their protective response of fight or flight and shutdown, and really maybe only have glimmers, if experienced at all, that ventral vagal state where it feels safe enough to connect, rest, and digest. And so a lot of times what we'll see in complex trauma survivors, and this could be you, is, certainly digestive issues, autoimmune issues, reproductive issues, all kinds of stuff. And that is really common. But if you do not have a complex trauma history and you find yourself vacillating between those protective states, chances are you are somehow close to burnout or already there. And so it can be really important to address that burnout. And I talk about that in my program and other places. Hi, I'm Jen Barnes, and you're about to experience how to ditch the old ways of doing things, embrace your neurodivergence, learn tips and tricks to function optimally, and love yourself, neurodivergence and all. Welcome to the Self-Loved Woman podcast. Hey, it's Jen. I'm so glad you're here. Today, we're going to talk about a really important topic. In fact, it's probably one of the things that I get asked about the most and that I see ADHD women struggling with the most, especially ADHD women entrepreneurs. And so what is this thing? It's productivity. And before we dive into this, I want to talk a little bit first about what I mean by productivity. But before I even do that, I want to share that as we're talking about productivity, it's really important to separate your value from what you get done. We live in a world that values our productivity, what we produce and share with others, over everything else. And I want to be clear that as we talk about productivity today, and I talk about the importance of it and how to be more productive, how to get things done, that I'm in no way saying that you are not a worthwhile person if you struggle with productivity. Because the truth is our brains do things in a way that can make productivity particularly challenging in our neurotypical society, especially if we're not doing things the ADHD way. So I want to name that, and I hope you hear that deeply, you feel it deeply, that this isn't about you got to get stuff done to be good enough. Not at all. And I think it is important to speak to as we talk about productivity, because it can be such a common thing that we get wrapped around, and then we get into the culture of busyness and all that kind of stuff. And so today is really focused on helping you do the things you need to do for your business and really for your life. So now, as we talk about productivity, I want to say a little bit what I mean about productivity, particularly relative to your business. Because the thing is productivity in my mind basically means like just getting stuff done, right? Like I'm going to do stuff. But we actually want to be intentional about what we're actually getting done, right? I'm sure you know, as an ADHDer, you could get all kinds of stuff done and none of it is what you need to, right? I mean, just the other day, I went into my shed and I was going to do some yard work that had to be done because I got a letter from the city, right? Total ADHD moment, saying I had to do it. And I was like, ooh, my shed is really unorganized. It is so hard to find these tools. I should just pull everything out, clean it, hang up some things. And I was like, okay, Jen, first things first. Today, while we could do that, we would spend our day doing it, and then we'd get in trouble with the city, probably get a big fine, the one that was threatened, right? So it's like, yeah, I could have been really productive cleaning out and organizing my shed, and that would have been lovely, but it's not the task that needed to be done. And this happens a lot in our business, where we're like, ooh, I should do this. And sometimes where we get our ideas on what needs to be done can come from watching other people, seeing what they do and being like, ooh, that'd be cool if I did that, or ooh, I should do that. And not recognizing that it may or may not be a fit for where we are uniquely in our own business right now. And that a lot of times we want to focus on the most important tasks for our business. And the things that we see other people doing really aren't a fit. So when I talk about productivity, I mean doing the tasks you actually need to do. And the right tasks, like that's what comes out of my mouth and into my mind, or vice versa, I guess. And the word right is so tricky because, it introduces this paradigm of right versus wrong, good versus bad. And that's not really what I mean. It's more just like the tasks that you need to do the most to do what you want to do in your business, to be able to serve people. And to serve people, you have to bring them into your business. And to be paid to serve people, you have to also have them pay you for it. And so there's things that you have to do. Those are the most important things to be able to have the business that you want serving the people that you serve. So when we talk about productivity, I'm meaning doing those quote unquote right tasks to be able to do what your business needs now at this point in its development or growth, depending on where you're at. To be able to do this requires an ability to be able to prioritize, to consider your vision and prioritize. It requires the ability to focus and even know what to focus on, and then be able to direct your attention and concentrate effectively. And it requires an ability to actually do the thing. And that's kind of an oversimplified version of it, right? Like there's lots and barriers of challenges of each. I'm actually in the process of developing a offer, Unleash Your Focus and Productivity, to do things the ADHD way. And so that should be coming out, should be out by the time you listen to this episode. So make sure you keep your eyes peeled for that. But that will help be able to do some of those tasks. So while these things like prioritizing and concentration and doing the thing are essential to being able to get the right things done in your business, instead of doing it the neurotypical way, which is the way most of us were taught, there can also be these hidden barriers or obstacles that tend to keep ADHD women entrepreneurs stuck. And so if you're applying these tools and skills the ADHD way that I share in my programs, and you're like, wow, I just still can't do it, then a lot of times these invisible or hidden obstacles can be the barriers. And today I'm going to share the three main ones I see, but we're going to unpack one of them way more in depth. So first I'll share the three that I see. One is that a lot of times people try to get stuff done and they just can't. They're like, I can't sit down. I can't do it. Whatever. And it can be because your nervous system is dysregulated. And when your nervous system is dysregulated, it's going to be harder to focus. And here's why. So let me back up before I even share that. When we talk about nervous system dysregulation, what we mean is you are no longer in that homeostasis, what is known as the ventral vagal state, where you're safe enough to rest, digest, and connect. And instead, you have tipped into a protective response, which can be the fight or flight response or the shutdown response. And those protective states, they really haven't evolved, actually. They existed with reptiles and still do, and came along as mammals were evolving as well. So we have the same system for protection that reptiles have. So it's not very sophisticated. So it doesn't understand the difference between a bear chasing you or a nasty comment on social media, feeling overwhelmed by your tasks, not having any clean underwear because you couldn't get your laundry done. I don't know, or a big one for me. I didn't get my sheets in the dryer on time. So then you have to stay up late or sleep on like blankets or something, right? Just happened this last weekend. Anyway, but my point is those kind of things, our brains sees it as stress. It sees it as a threat. It doesn't realize that like it's not actually life threatening. Like a bear is not actually going to kill us, or a lion, or whatever animal you go with. So when we get into a protective state, all our nervous system is worried about is survival. It's just like, hey, we need to get to safety. So everything else is deprioritized. And yes, that means bigger things like your reproductive system, your digestive system, your immune system. But it also means things like your ability to focus on a task, your ability to connect with others, because none of that stuff matters if you're dead from the bear that's chasing you, right? So all of your energy goes to that. And so when your nervous system is dysregulated, that's why it's really hard to focus. And if you're like, but Jen, I'm chronically in that state, then that's a problem. And it's really important to address that burnout that you're experiencing and not being able to get out of that. I will say one of the things people with complex trauma can tend to vacillate between their protective response of fight or flight and shutdown, and really maybe only have glimmers if experienced at all, that ventral vagal state where it feels safe enough to connect, rest, and digest. And so a lot of times what we'll see in complex trauma survivors, and this could be you, is, certainly digestive issues, autoimmune issues, reproductive issues, all kinds of stuff. And that is really common. But if you do not have a complex trauma history and you find yourself vacillating between those protective states, chances are you are somehow close to burnout or already there. And so it can be really important to address that burnout. And I talk about that in my program and other places. I think I even did a podcast episode on it not too long ago. So you can always check that out as well. And when you are dysregulated and you are constantly in those states, you're not going to be able to be productive. You're not going to be able to get stuff done because you're not going to be able to sit down, make yourself do it, and focus and concentrate. It's just not going to happen. And so the thing that needs to be done then is you do something to regulate your nervous system. And I talk about that in my new offer, Unleash Your Focus and Productivity the ADHD Way, how to regulate your nervous system. So that one should be out by the time you hear this, and it's a lower ticket offer. So it's more accessible for people who don't want to invest in a big program. All right. So that is one thing that we can do is regulate our nervous systems. The second challenge or hidden obstacle I see in ADHD women, especially ADHD women entrepreneurs, is big feelings like fear, doubt, insecurity, overwhelm holding you back. And I see it a lot. It can come up in sneaky ways. Like it might be obvious, like you're like, I'm scared to do that, right? But a lot of times it comes up in the form of procrastination, right? Which don't get me wrong, procrastination is a legit strategy for ADHDers to get stuff done because it creates a sense of urgency, which makes it interesting to us. So we're like, oh yeah, cool. It's just not an effective strategy to use consistently over long periods of time and like regularly use, because it can put us in that nervous system dysregulation chronically again, right? Because you're basically amping up your fight or flight response a little bit to get it done. And it's just over and over and over. But if you are finding yourself procrastinating, sometimes it can be something like fear or doubt or insecurity. And so one of the things that we work on in my program and that we're actually going to address in an upcoming 3-part live series that I'm going to do again, starting in August. I believe it's August 1st. It's coming your way. How to overcome invisible ADHD obstacles to build a meaningful, prosperous business you love. And we will go over these more in depth. But I want to share what I see and how you can start to spot it in yourself. Like, let's say you're having a hard time posting on social media and you really don't know why. Like, you're just not able to be consistent, but you're using all the tools that we talk about. You're doing all the stuff the ADHD way. Your nervous system is regulated and you're just like, I just can't. It's like there's this block. Sometimes the block can be something like a part of you is feeling fear, doubt, or insecurity, and that you need to work with those parts of you and lean in and get curious and understand what's going on, and then help work with that part of you to overcome the fear, doubt, and insecurity so that you can move forward and do what you need to do. So that's just a brief explanation of that. We'll go more in depth over my 3-day event that's coming up in August. So if you're not signed up for that, make sure you sign up on the priority notification list. Registration will open in late July, but you can sign up to be among the first notified on the priority notification list, which is in the show notes. All right. So the third hidden or invisible obstacle I see, and a lot of times it could connect to that second one, is unhealed wounds. And this can be complex trauma. It could be that you sustained a lot of abuse growing up, whether it's physical, sexual, emotional, or verbal, or psychological, something else, right? Or neglect, right? Neglect's a big one. So unhealed wounds can be that, but also sometimes it can be unhealed wounds from growing up ADHD in a society that wasn't designed for your ADHD brain, and a society that, at least when we were growing up, did nothing to accommodate, and in fact, constantly criticized and corrected us for doing it wrong, right? So you have probably heard me by now, if you've been following me for a while. I share that Dr. Michael, I believe it's Jelinek is his last name. He's a child psychiatrist out at Harvard. He has very conservatively estimated that ADHD children by age 10 receive an average of 20,000 more negative or critical corrective comments than their non-ADHD peers. And that is super conservative. It's based on 9 more comments a day from school age, like from when you start going to school till age 10. And if you think about that, right, like 9 more, I mean, your school day is what, like 7 hours or something? So that's 1 an hour and then 2 from your parents. If you grew up with parents or whoever raised you, that is like a very, very conservative estimate. And so when you think about that, all those negative and critical comments that are telling you essentially that you're doing it wrong, it's no wonder that on some level, you may have started to believe that something is wrong with you, that you are fundamentally flawed. And that belief and those wounds that helped you develop that belief actually make it really hard to be productive in your business, because it fuels the fear, it fuels the doubt, it fuels the insecurity. And of course it does, because if you grow up essentially being communicated to you that you're fundamentally flawed, how could it not impact your ability to be courageous and get out there and try stuff? Just gonna put this out there, right? It's like, no, I am terrified of putting myself out there, is what I hear from a lot of ADHD women. And so if you're still noticing after you use the tools that I talk about in my programs, or regulating your nervous system, and you're like, I still can't, it might be one of these things. And we talk about this more in my 3-part live, and I start to give you my process, or I give you my process for how to deal with some of these old unhealed wounds. Some of the deeper stuff actually requires more one-to-one attention and access to me to do, which is why I teach that inside of Ascend, my program, or in my one-to-one coaching. But if you're really looking to get started on addressing some of these obstacles, I highly recommend you sign up for that priority notification list. So, just to summarize today, if you've been having a hard time being productive and you're like trying tools and strategies developed for ADHDers by ADHDers, right? Like not the stuff that neurotypical people tell you to do because their brain is different. It'll work for them, but not for you, right? Not for me either, right? Unless we get a little bit of willpower every day, we get like a limited amount. You might be able to hack your way through it, but then you will be incredibly tired and drained and not have energy for anything else that day or maybe days to follow. So that's why we want to use ADHD ways of doing things. But if that's not working for you, it's time to check in and say, okay, is my nervous system regulated? Do I need to go regulate my nervous system? And it depends on, if you are in your fight or flight response or if you're in your shutdown response, there's different ways to regulate. And we go over that inside Unleash Your Focus and Productivity. But basically, if you're in your fight or flight response, fluid movement with breath is what can help, because it's a protective response of mobilization where you're moving. So it's a way to like make the movement more fluid with breath as opposed to more just getting the hell out of there, right? And getting to safety. And the other is perhaps regulating from shutdown, that shutdown response, which is protection through immobilization, right? That's when your nervous system is like turning off, well, not turning off, but turning down pain signals for emotional and physical pain, which is good if you're going to be eaten alive by a bear, but it'll turn that down and you feel numb. So that's protection through immobilization, which is why any movement at all can help with that. So, step one, check your nervous system. Step two, see if there's any big feelings getting in the way, parts of you that have some objections to doing what you're doing, and maybe seeing if you can work with that. And step three, if you've got unhealed wounds, I'm not saying like you have to heal all your trauma and all your unhealed stuff to be able to ever have a business. Like, that's not what I'm saying. I want to make sure that's not what people hear. And if there's been no healing and you're having a hard time moving forward, or maybe there's been some healing of that and you're having a hard time moving forward, it may be that there's another layer of work for you to do there. So I hope this was helpful today. I would love to have you inside of either my upcoming free 3-part training on how to overcome invisible ADHD obstacles so you can build a prosperous and meaningful business you love, or my mini program, Unleash Your Focus and Productivity the ADHD Way. If you'd like to join either of those, you can check the show notes and links will be available for you there. Otherwise, make sure you follow and share this podcast. Thank you so much for being here.